Street Genius, Part 32. In the closing months of 1944, after almost a decade of war, the tide was turning against Japan. Their economy was floundering, their military overstretched across half of Asia, and the territories they had won throughout the Pacific were now toppling like dominoes to US forces. Defeat seemed inevitable. On December 26, 1944, Second Lieutenant Hiro Onoda of the Japanese Imperial Army was deployed to the small island of Lubang in the Philippines. His orders were to slow the United States' progress as much as possible, to stand and fight at all costs, and to never surrender. Both he and his commander knew it was essentially a suicide mission. In February 1945, the Americans arrived in Lubang and took the island with overwhelming force. Within days, most of the Japanese soldiers had either surrendered or been killed, but Onoda and three of his men managed to hide in the jungle. From there, they began a guerrilla warfare campaign against the US forces and local population, attacking supply lines, shooting at stray soldiers, and interfering with the American forces in any way that they could. That August, half a year later, the United States dropped atomic bombs on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japan surrendered, and the deadliest war in human history came to its dramatic conclusion. However, thousands of Japanese soldiers were still scattered among the Pacific Isles, and most like Onoda were hiding in the jungle, unaware that the war was over. These holdouts continued to fight and pillage as they had before. This was a real problem for rebuilding Eastern Asia after the war, and the governments agreed something must be done. The US military, in conjunction with the Japanese government, dropped thousands of leaflets throughout the Pacific region. Among that, the war was over and it was time for everyone to go home. Onoda and his men, like many others, found and read these leaflets, but unlike most of the others, Onoda decided that they were fake and a trap set by the American forces to get guerrilla fighters to show themselves. Onoda burned the leaflets and he and his men stayed hidden and continued to fight. 5 years went by, the leaflets had stopped, and most of the American forces had long since gone home. The local populations on Lubang attempted to return to their normal lives of farming and fishing. Yet there were heroes, Onoda and his merry men, still shooting at the farmer, burning their crops, stealing their livestock, and murdering locals who wandered too far into the jungle. The Philippine government then took to drawing up new flyers and spreading them out across the jungle. Come out, they said, the war is over, you lost. But these too were ignored. In 1952, the Japanese government made one final effort to draw that last remaining soldiers out of hiding throughout the Pacific. This time, letters and pictures from the missing soldiers' families were airdropped, along with a personal note from the emperor himself. Over again, Onoda refused to believe that the information was real. Once again, he believed that the airdrop to be a trick by the Americans. Once again, he and his men stood and continued to fight.